Okay. Uh, so this this is a sort of uh, by accident. Well, not by accident, but something that I've been thinking about. And what I've been thinking about is this idea of reading difficult texts and what that relationship is, or how does it feel when you are in relation uh, with a difficult text to read, and how does that transfer on to perhaps real relationships or friendships, or just people that you meet. And one thing that I have found very interesting is my experience with anti Anti-Oedipus here, Anti-Oedipus, and I've really grown to like the book for a variety of reasons. Perhaps the first reason is because there is something that feels very rebellious about the book, and after all, it is a lot of people quote it as a revolutionary kind of book, in attempt to answer the May '68 event in French history. For those of you that don't know, I would suggest looking it up. It's very interesting. But besides the sort of initial rebelliousness, the thing that I enjoy, well, I didn't enjoy it in the beginning. I I'm not gonna lie, reading Anti-Oedipus, and I'm still reading it, has, you know, the initial relationship, right? It began with me not knowing anything about it, and also not being able to understand it. And for those of you that have read it or heard about it, it is, it's a text that will make you wanna, pound your head uh, in trying to understand it. But after, you know, recently after sitting down with this text almost every day and trying and rereading religiously, you could say, I'm doing a very sort of perhaps unorthodox way of reading. A lot of people like to say that when you read difficult texts, you should just read it through, just to read it through, to get the main ideas, and then you should plan to reread, and that's where you will start to begin to grasp more. I have chosen another route where I have decided to. I do this. I will. My initial plan was to read section by section, not chapter by chapter, but read section by section, and then reread it in order to present the topic, to present the section as if I were teaching a class. That is what my whole project is with this Anti-Oedipus series that I've been doing. And sometimes I catch myself trying to be perfect, trying to present the text in sort of a full understanding of it. And then when I began to reflect on why was I obsessing so much about trying to understand, trying to present the text itself in sort of a flawless manner. This it began teaching me something about myself. Now, I always knew I was a little bit self-critical. Some would say I'm very highly self-critical, but what I began to see, and I started realizing that I had to let go at a certain point. And so this really begins my relationship with this text. It begins with a desire to understand, and a very persistent frustration. And I started reading other guides on how to read this text, and yes, it did help me begin to understand some things that I was lost upon, but it still did not feed what needed to be fed, and that's a very ambiguous statement. But what eventually ended up happening after I was, beating my head every day and trying to understand this text and trying to present the topics in the text, while and so on. Eventually, I ended up constructing a method. And what I ended up doing was I ended up saying to myself that I will continue reading the text. But when it comes at the end of the week to present the section that is supposed to be presented, I will reread that section. I will reread that section and build a presentation off of it and do it like that. So in some sense, I am doing a continued reading throughout the week, and then I will present a section of it at the end of the week. So I'm not, constructing some kind of madness by rereading the same section over and over so I can fully understand it. Because what is missing is that I am not able to move on and read the continued sections that are building upon each other as it continues on. But what I'm trying to say is not so much about understanding, but how eventually I experienced something as I was reading Anti-Oedipus. And what ended up happening as I was daily going through frustrations and trying to understand the text and trying to, just trying to understand it, I eventually broke past a barrier in reading Anti-Oedipus. And this barrier, this shift, ended up becoming enjoyable. Like the text itself became enjoyable to read. Now I just enjoy spending time with the text and just reading it. And I stopped reading the other reading guides, and I told myself I will read the reading guides of Anti-Oedipus when I finish Anti-Oedipus, and then I'll perhaps go back and reread it. But for now, for some reason, I broke past this barrier and I started having a very enjoyable relationship with the text. And I thought that this was a really interesting experience about there is a certain persistence that allows one to break past a barrier where the very frustration eventually becomes enjoyable. And I think that's what I'm trying to express here, is that my frustration in trying to understand Anti-Oedipus and, pounding my head every day, trying to get what they're saying, and realizing that there is this abyss of knowledge and gaps missing in my understanding, and all the books I would have to read to sort of trace back their lines of thought. Eventually, after just being persistent, taking notes, being persistent, now I have gone to a state beyond frustration. But in some sense, I feel like it is still in this place of frustration, but it is a enjoyable frustration. And I feel like this is something that I don't think a lot of people get to enjoy often when you spend a long time, when you spend almost religiously with one text. I don't think a lot of people get to enjoy something like that, because you could say people read specific books to escape, enjoyable texts to escape and go into sort of a fantasy. You having a Lacanian experience reading Anti-Oedipus? Yeah, maybe. Yeah. But this this relationship with a difficult text is it's something that I don't think, again, I don't think many people get to experience, because it's, it really, I'm not gonna lie, I really want to, like I said, I really want to beat my head against trying to understand. And now it's enjoyable. Now it's enjoyable. And there's an aspect of that specific relationship that I think can transfer to personal relationships, where, I literally experienced as if I was fighting with or arguing with another person and another human being. That's what it felt like. And I think people should perhaps read difficult texts, because in some sense, the qualitative experience is, it is like you are arguing with someone else. And this arguing with someone else, the feeling is that, when we argue with other people, a lot of the things are not that we're so upset with each other, but it's that we can't express what we want to express. If I wanted to take a Lacanian turn here, right? It's language that is in the way between us. And we're trying to express and trying to understand each other. But to be in this constant mode of frustration, this is where I began to enjoy the actual book itself, which is so strange, because it's not, I feel like it's a very rare experience. I don't get that experience by reading Dostoevsky. I don't get that experience by reading some fictional books. There are, perhaps, if we're talking like poetry, I take that back. There are some fictional books that, wait, am I using that right? Yeah, there are some fictional books that are difficult, and you could spend a lot of time with and get frustrated with. But there is something to be said about the difficult text and the difficult relationship. And to me, it really showed that there is a sort of a barrier that you beat, and eventually you get past it and you break it, and it becomes enjoyable. Now, did it ever solve my questions about Anti-Oedipus? Well, I mean, it solved some. I do have a better understanding, but there is still a persistent frustration with the book. It's very subtle, but it's enjoyable. It's almost like I can't wait to read it, to misunderstand it again. And that's a very interesting line to have, or to experience with someone else, if we're trying to do some parallel, that I should be almost hoping to misunderstand my partner or my friend, or in some way, so that way because it encourages interaction in some sense. Because I thought about what it would be like if we all understood each other perfectly. There would just, to me, there would just be no real enjoyment. There would be no real enjoyment. So, in some sense, yes, we must, I think, beat our heads against with frustration and with each other, and misunderstand each other, and perhaps even look forward to misunderstanding each other to some degree, or it becomes a little game about trying to figure out exactly where did we misunderstand each other, and constantly going back to that, like I have gone back with this text multiple times, is that I start to see that I missed something. I misread something. I was maybe too tired that day, or so on, or perhaps I just wasn't interested enough to pay attention to a specific line that was said. And I think having and conversing with a difficult text in this way shows you that there's always something that you missed. And there's always something that you didn't read or contextually understand when you're reading something. And I think this goes well with people. Not to say that we are trying to read people, but in terms of the context of understanding, there's always something that eludes us. And to go back to that, it, I wonder what that would look like, to go back to something that you misunderstood within a relationship, to go back. This is what we call reflecting, right? But to go back to the person, and sort of bring again, exactly what did I misunderstand? What did I not see? So it probably does perhaps take some self-reflection, and then a re-engagement with the person. If we're going with the Lacan's way. But yeah, I think that's enough. I think I spread enough. I guess what I'm trying to say is, read difficult texts, and there is some kind of experience where, am I having a relationship with the author of the text, or am I actually having a relationship with the text itself? And I think that's a question that I'm still trying to answer, is that when I'm reading something, is it really the text itself that I'm having a relationship? I feel like this is getting into like a Derrida argument. There's nothing outside the text itself. But, I'm not understanding you, but everything is somehow perfect. Yeah, it's enjoyable. It's enjoyable. that you could say that tension is enjoyable. The tension is enjoyable. After beating my head for weeks. It's the working through, but it is still a working through in the best way possible. Well, yeah. But all right, I think that's enough. I really didn't. I meant for this to be a quick reflection and a quick just talk about it, but you never know how long you're going to talk about something. But yeah, that's it. So, all right, guys, take care, and thanks, Goodell, for for responding. I always enjoy your comments. So, all right, guys, take care.